Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am Sean Anderson, Most Valuable Podcast, and the upcoming segment is from our full Fast Break podcast that we recorded. And if you do want to check out that full podcast, head over to Blog Talk Radio/The Fast Break. You'll be able to find the full podcast over there. But let's move on to the Spurs and the possibility of them bringing in Chris Paul. You look at this. Mark Stein was not fired from ESPN. He wrote, sources, Clippers regard Spurs as the legitimate threat to sign Chris Paul. San Antonio's are exploring the feasibility of making a free agent run at all-star point guard Chris Paul, league sources told ESPN. So looking at this, there's a lot of cap moves that need to be made. So let me get into it first before this all happens, because a lot needs to be made.
Thank you, Sean.
The max offer that the Spurs can make Chris Paul is 4 years, $152 million. The Clippers can probably offer up something around 5 years, $210 million, with the way the new CBA has been restructured. But that also might be different because of certain contract trade clauses and all that is in CP3's contract. But then looking at this is what they need to offer a max deal to Chris Paul. They need to renounce the rights to Manu Ginobili, Patty Mills, Jonathan Simmons, as well as potential free agents of Dwayne Dedmon and David Lee. And they would also face complications and decisions on Tony Parker, and then possibly Paul Gasol and Danny Green. And also there's the possibility of them possibly moving LaMarcus Aldridge's contract if Powell resigns, because Powell does have a player option. So a lot needs to happen for this to happen. But we're not really going to phrase this as should the Spurs sign CP3, because I think we're all in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a chance.
Yeah, you should definitely try to do that. I was going to say fuck yeah, but I went with the more PC thing of hell yeah. But looking at this, CP3 would make the Spurs a much better team. We all know that. I mean, you look at Tony Parker, he was fantastic in the playoffs, and he was pretty good this regular season, but you see the injury that he suffered during the playoffs, looks old, he's getting older, not getting any younger. You look at Patty Mills, he's going to want a bigger contract, so you're going to have to put a lot into him, but then if you get a massive upgrade in CP3, possibly the best point guard that San Antonio's ever seen, that would be something that completely changed the game and put a threat towards the Warriors. So it's really the question of, will CP3 sign with the Spurs? Because there's a lot to go into it, and then also CP3 will have to take less money and then think that San Antonio is a better option than Los Angeles. So looking at this, Ricky, do you think that CP3 will end up signing with the Spurs?
I would say yes, and the reason why is, even if, let's say, the Clippers go, you know what, come on and stay, Blake's coming back, you can come back, we're going to put together a team, I would look Doc Rivers in the face and go, no, we're not, because you have proven that you can't do both head coach and lead the basketball operations, because this team, like you even mentioned before we started recording the segment of, well, yeah, Ricky, you had them in the Western Conference Finals. Yeah, and then I was blatantly wrong because they were a horrible team this year. And by horrible, I mean they didn't live up to potential.
A lot of injuries. CP3 got injured, Blake got injured.
And I know you can say that, but at the same time, I kind of look at it and go, it's kind of an excuse for this team, because obviously Doc Rivers is in over his head on the basketball operations side. I would say head coach, will get someone else for the operations side. But for the Spurs, I think CP3 should be more than willing to come to the Spurs, because you look at this team, and the big thing I look at is, from what you said, the most interesting part is where you're like, oh yeah, they're thinking about moving LaMarcus Aldridge. And to me, that's one where I look at it and go, yeah, go ahead and do that. Because the biggest thing, what was the biggest thing we saw in the Western Conference Finals when Kawhi went out? What was Pop saying about LaMarcus? Oh, he needs to basically take over the game. Yep. He can't be secondary and be waiting for shots. He's got to get going right away. Well, guess who's not going to be that passive? CP3. So if I'm CP3, I'm going, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be able to win a title with the Clippers. Do I want the money or do I want the titles? Let's be honest. You want the titles, go to the Spurs.
It's a bold call, Ricky. I sort of agree with you in principle about, LaMarcus Aldridge being an easier asset to move, or maybe a more possible one to move realistically. But Chris Paul, as the head of the Players Association for the NBA, like, he and LeBron kind of crafted that new CBA to ensure that they would get another contract after this one. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is the reason why that he would take the jump right now to the Spurs, because the window has really closed on this Clippers team, and closed hard with injuries. And with Chris Paul the last couple of years, 74 games and 61 games respectively. And then you look at Blake Griffin and his injuries. I mean, he 67, 35, 61. Like those, you can't build championships around players who are injured year after year after year. And having someone as reliable, I know Kawhi just went out with an injury, but like different levels of injury.
That was,
Let's be completely honest.
And that was, whether you want to say it was dirty or a complete accident, it looked like an accident, or there were some ways you could see it as an accident.
Right. And the point is, like, I would put my faith into, I'm going to go for the ring at this point because I have one more shot at a big contract. I have faith in yourself on that end, and then know that, look, this Clippers team could just completely blow up during this offseason. I could easily see JJ being gone. I could see Blake Griffin. He's probably going to say he's still their centerpiece, but there's a lot of questions around this team and what they're going to do, and just be realistic with yourself and be like, how am I going to get over the Warriors? Because that's the only question. And if you watched what happened with this Spurs team this year, you go, yeah, if I was out there and healthy
with Kawhi,
with Kawhi Leonard, like, I don't see any reason they couldn't put up a solid fight against them.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think that you could have two super teams out there in San Antonio, because I don't think Los Angeles is a current super team. I mean, you look at Blake Griffin, I think he's completely overrated. DeAndre Jordan's a fantastic player, and I think he would do exactly what he's doing, but it's completely heightened with the addition of Chris Paul, because he's going to make those lanes more open.
He's one half of Lob City.
Yeah, I know. Chris Paul is a fantastic playmaker, and DeAndre Jordan would thrive on different NBA teams. DeAndre Jordan, I don't know if he was an all-pro on different NBA teams.
I think he's kicking himself for not going to Dallas, even though Dallas was worse than LA.
I don't know about that. He's still got paid in LA.
Yeah, he's getting paid, but we'll see. CP3 is going to be
he's
gone.
a guy who I think his functionality is completely based off of him being in the right system. I think him in a different system would easily disappear. Like, we wouldn't see the level of impact that he puts out in LA if we dropped him onto like Utah or like the
with
Timberwolves.
Utah, he might be able to do it.
Like, he needs to land in the right system with the right guys around him, because otherwise he just turns into like a better Tyson Chandler.
Tyson Chandler was really good.
He was all right.
Tyson Chandler was Defensive Player of the Year a couple times.
Yeah, way back though. I'm talking like right now.
No, DeAndre Jordan's better than Tyson Chandler right now.
And that is what I said. He's a better version of Tyson Chandler.
I disagree with that. Anyways, I don't know why we got to there.
That's a shocker. We have a disagreement between Dave and Sean.
Looking at this, Chris Paul, they're not a super team, is what I was trying to get to. And Chris Paul going to San Antonio would create super teams, a super team, or at least two super teams in the West. You have Chris Paul at least the point guard. If Danny Green's able to stay back with this crazy contract situation that the Spurs would be put in, having to sign Chris Paul, I mean, it might be a mess. But then
would they have to though? And the question I want to pose out there is, of course, like everyone's expecting that, if CP3 moves, he's going to maximize and want the most years and the most money that he can get. But do you think there's an option? Maybe CP3 looks at, because one of the things we've talked about is Team Banana Boat. Does he look at it and go, well, LeBron's kind of locked up for maybe 2 years at the most with the Cavs before he's an unrestricted free agent? You know what? I'll take a 2-year deal. And then me and LeBron will become unrestricted free agents at the same time to put Team Banana Boat together.
I think with the way that, like Dave was mentioning, this is the last chance, or one of the last chances you can have at a big contract, and with the way that injuries can't happen, with the way that, like Dave said, 74 games and 61 games that Chris Paul has played in the last 2 seasons. His body's not breaking down, but it could break at any moment. And he's 32 years old. He'll be 36 when the 4-year deal ended up, or if he sent a 5-year deal, he'll be 37. So looking at this, I don't think this is going to be something where he's going to take less than the max. He's going to take the max anywhere he goes, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's San Antonio. And looking at what that would create is at the two super teams, you have Chris Paul, Danny Green possibly, Kawhi. At the power forward position, you would have LaMarcus Aldridge, I guess, and then or at the center position, you have LaMarcus Aldridge, and then at that power forward, you're probably going to have to put a bum there because you don't have...
They'll find someone, though. That's the thing. Like, come on. This is the Spurs. They'll pull up somebody from the D-League, and they'll just shine like a star.
You look at Dwayne Dedman. He was fantastic throughout this whole season. David Lee was...
Somebody's going to give him money.
Yeah,
I mean, he
had
a resurgence.
Yeah, and then Powell would obviously... I think he would have to be gone for them to be able to sign.
Otherwise, he'd have to take way less money. He's got no incentive to do that.
Yeah, so he would have to take less money. So at least you look at the 4 right there of Danny Green, Chris Paul, Kawhi Leonard, and LaMarcus Aldridge. I don't know if it's on the super team level of KD, Steph, Clay, and Draymond, but it's still pretty fucking good.
I think matchup wise, they did keep up though. That's the thing, and that's all you really need to do, because who knows what happens every year. We watched it again this year, and it was how many guys went down with injuries in these playoffs, and it was just one after the other after the other. So really, I mean, the biggest thing is get to the playoffs, be healthy, and you don't know what's going to happen as far as the player health, but if you know that you can give them a fair fight for their money, like the San Antonio team, like honestly, probably would have taken the Warriors to 6 or 7 if Kawhi was healthy.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me we're going to lose a little bit of bench depth, but we're going to gain Chris Paul, I mean, come on, what is not to love in that kind of a trade?
And taking all of that in, because we talk about the Spurs improving as a team, the Warriors at least not having a lot of bench. You're going to have 3 players in Chris Paul, Kawhi Leonard, LaMarcus Aldridge going up against Steph, Clay, Draymond, and Kevin Durant. Which team would you favor at least? And then we'll go back to the Spurs and Chris Paul. But what team would you favor if those 3 are laid out and those 4 are laid out? Who would you take in a 7-game series? Because you look at what Kawhi did.
I was gonna say I want to lean to
game.
Kawhi, and and maybe I'm overhyping him, but like he's someone who, again, we talked about like with his growth in his career and how much he's changed the way he plays. He's grown his shot and he's continued to get better and better. I honestly feel like he's, like after LeBron, it's Kawhi and then Kevin Durant, and then it kind of like goes back and forth a little bit. But like, honestly, he's a guy who I could see taking over a series easily. So I'm going to say it's a flat even draw for me.
And Chris Paul can at least take up some of the slack offensively, and Chris Paul himself can even create more opportunities for LaMarcus Aldridge offensively.
Come on. His passing ability with that Spurs system, that'd be something.
And you look at LaMarcus, at least Chris Paul defensively, one of the best defensive guards in the NBA. Ricky, who would you take? Would you still take the Warriors 4, or would you take the Spurs 3 that were coming up?
I would take the Warriors 4, because the one thing that I know we didn't mention in the finals preview when we mentioned it, but I feel like even if Kawhi finished that game and the Spurs won game 1, Steve Kerr still working with the team, they would have made the adjustments and would have eventually won that series. Now, would it have been a better series? Maybe. Might have gone 6 or 7. But I feel like the Warriors still would have gotten off of... Well, he was still working...
He's making phone calls.
Well, no, he was even there at halftime. When they'd go in at halftime, he's talking to the team at the half. They would still make the adjustments. So I would still go with the Warriors. The one thing I think about, though, with this is because of all the moves that would have to happen... Do the Spurs have to make this move? Do they have to get CP3? Because there are lesser options out there, and the one that I'm looking at is Derrick Rose. And I know that that's one where it's like, well, Sean, you mentioned CP3 and his body might break down as he gets older. Derrick Rose has broken down. He's only 28. However, if you can get him for less and keep a little bit more of those reserves, I kind of feel like the Spurs might be at more of a disadvantage than the Warriors than if it's like, well, screw it, we're going away from bench depth and we're going to go all in on CP3.
D Rose is taking the most money he can. He's gonna, if he can get a max, he's going to get a max. He's not going to get a max.
That's what I'm saying.
But he's not going to take less money.
Yeah.
He's not going to take a 1-year contract. He's going to take as much money as he possibly can, because that car can break down fully. I mean, that car can just be done at any second. I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, though, because then you look at a guy like Drew Holiday. I don't know if Drew Holiday would offer, or at least warrant, max money on the market there. I mean,
if he gave you enough games, again, another injury-prone guard.
But then again, you look at Drew Holiday, and he was, he's a great facilitator. He's good defensively, not as good as Chris Paul. And then, like Ricky mentioned, at least you're not going to drain yourself defensively and depth-wise looking at this team. So I think it's interesting, but then again, I think you have to make a move. You can't be stagnant if you're the Spurs.
They're going to take a shot. I mean, even somebody, we talked about Lowry being a possibility.
Yeah.
And they're going to take a shot, and I think the biggest problem here is they're stuck in a bad financial place because of Paul Gasol kind of controlling them. So if they can Jedi mind trick him into opting out.
I was going to say what might be a blessing in disguise is if Paul go ahead and if he says, you know what, I'm going to take that player option and come back, because then it forces you to move that LaMarcus Aldridge contract.
Well, it doesn't force you. It just makes you stagnant.
If you want CP3, you're going to move LaMarcus Aldridge.
That's what I want to mention, though, is what would you rather have, CP3 or LaMarcus Aldridge? If it came down to that, would you rather have CP3 and signing him? Can I finish it? CP3 and signing him, or moving LaMarcus Aldridge? Why would you rather have CP3?
It's what I saw in the Western Conference Finals. LaMarcus Aldridge, I know you could be saying, well, Ricky, you're putting a microscope over this one thing, but when Kawhi went down and they needed LaMarcus Aldridge to step up, he didn't. And I don't have that worry with CP3. CP3, even if Kawhi goes down, even if a Tony Parker goes down, CP3 is going to say, okay, guys, huddle around. This is on me, and he's going to lead that team. LaMarcus Aldridge is not that guy.
Well, do you think that's different just because of the positions they play, though? I mean, it's tough to say that as a power forward.
The point guard is one of those things where it's like you are the team, but if you're a vet on that team, I feel like you should be able to, well, Kawhi's not out there, it's on me. And I look at
you still have one of the best coaches and Manu on that team.
And I look at one of the things with where they are in their draft position. If they're able to trade LaMarcus, get CP3 for a year, I know that you're saying, well, Ricky, you're going to put a lot of stock in a rookie. You could have kind of a two-man platoon at that position of Paul, and then either right now I'm looking at Tankathon, any of the power forwards they could take. Bam, who's currently mocked to him, they can go at Swanigan or they can go at Jordan Bell. That's the top 3 power forwards that would be available for him at 29. So you can go ahead, take a power forward there, and just put a 1-2 of like, okay, Powell's our starter at power forward, and the rookie's right behind him.
It's interesting to bring up, Dave. Would you go CP3 or would you go LaMarcus, a guy that's been playing in your system, or would you rather, pretty much mortgage the farm on a 32-year-old?
Weirdly enough, I'm kind of leaning towards LaMarcus Aldridge. Point guard is a position that right now we have such an overflow of talented point guards, where the difference between a top-tier point guard like Chris Paul and a middle-tier point guard, somewhere like a Derrick Rose, Drew Holiday level, not that big of a difference. But as far as a power forward goes, or someone who can tweener between power forward and center, as LaMarcus Aldridge is, there's a hefty drop-off there. And I think you're being maybe overly critical of LaMarcus in that series because the Spurs offense was never designed to run through LaMarcus Aldridge. He's never been a focal point for them. So I feel like saying that he couldn't get it done, the system... it wasn't set for him to get it done. He did what he could, and I understand he's done better in stints in the past.
Well, it's like we saw him in that Rockets series even take over.
You can see him in bursts, yes.
It's one of those things where I just look at it and I go, why were you able to do it there, but you can't, I'm not saying like the actual performance. I'm talking about looking at him on the court. It looked like, dude, you don't have the same fire you had in that Rockets game where we saw you take over.
But then again, that's one game where Kawhi's going to come back. This is Kawhi's done, and it's something where you're looking at 4 of the greatest players in recent memory to step on an NBA court.
One of the best defenders in the league.
Yeah, and you're looking
matched
at
up
Draymond
with you,
Green.
spot on.
You're not looking at Ryan Anderson.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's completely different there. I would agree with Dave. I would rather go LaMarcus Aldridge, like you said. And then, again, talking about that draft position, we're talking about a guy that we talked about it before, or at least underrated draft prospects. We've mocked Josh Hart to him, and it's something where we believe in Josh Hart. We saw that the impact of Malcolm Brogdon, at least I believe in Josh Hart.
Well, I mean, if they need a power forward, though.
What I would say is you look at Bam, he's a project. Jordan Bell is very athletic. You look at Swanigan, he's not going to be able to get up and down the court as fluid as you look. But you look at Josh Hart, a guy that has experience, 4 years in college. Look at the impact that Malcolm Brogdon had on the Bucks. A guy very similar in the ways that they've come up. I know Brogdon was older when he came out, but you look at Josh Hart, a guy that went through, won a championship at Villanova, has been a guy that's consistently averaged points, but is not a guy that's just stuck only as an offensive weapon. He's a guy that's an all-around player. He can do both things offensively, defensively, is a decent shooter, can facilitate the ball. I would rather go with LaMarcus in that situation because he's also been a guy that has been in your system, and he's been a guy that's been playing with you. And I'm not saying that CP3 won't fit in the Spurs system and won't fit with Popovich. I think that will work itself out, but then again, you look at what Popovich is able to do and what he's able to instill in guys that have no NBA experience. You look at Dwayne Dedmon. I mean, the guy that was tossed around every single NBA team, and he lands on the Spurs, and you just see a growth in his game that's unreal. You look at Jonathan Simmons, a guy that, again, bounced up and back and forth between the D-League. Pop really didn't believe in him, and once Pop put that belief in him, he really grew his game. Danny Green's a guy that's developed into a 3-and-D player and has consistently stayed in the NBA, but he's been a guy that was first on the Cleveland Cavaliers as a high draft pick, but really never fleshed out there. He goes to the Spurs and develops his game, and now he's playing some of the best ball he's ever played. So you look at what Pop's able to get out of the players, and we know what you're going to get from CP3 every single night, but then you can get something where Josh Hart is a long-term solution at that point guard position, which would be interesting. You can always slide DeJounte Murray over to the 2.
I say DeJounte Murray's development this year has been something else, though. Like, for a guy who only played 38 games, what we got to see out of him at the end when he's under the spotlight, when he had the ball in his hands, there's a lot of hope there. I mean, he has the size,
but is he going to be
he needs
one,
to build up the muscle mass.
But is he going to be one where next year and maybe the next 2 years you're saying, man, DeJounte Murray, we can beat the Warriors with him? And that's
no. You need someone there over him, and that's why I like Chris Paul would be like ideal case scenario. But you can go out and get a veteran guard to be your one and him on the bench or him at the two if Danny Green has to get moved for something. But like I think they have confidence there, but I think they still this year you go for a 1 or 2 guard, and next year is supposed to be one of the better big man drafts. So why not wait it out one more year?
But then the question goes to, and this kind of goes back to what we talked about with the Celtics, and this is the final thing that I want to bring up, and then you guys can toss in your last and final remarks. Is that again looking at the Warriors, and we talked about this with the Celtics, looking at the Warriors and looking at the Cavs and the window that they have. Do you want to wait for that window to close? Because we look at Kawhi, he's not that old. He's a guy that's nearing 27 years old. He's nearing his prime, or what we think of prime of 27 to 31. Really hasn't hit that mark yet. Yep. He's growing still. I mean, we see the offensive uptake in his game. Still one of the best defensive players in the world. You look at LaMarcus Aldridge's contract's going to come up as well. But then again, if you go out and get a guy that you think can develop in Josh Hart, DeJounte Murray, he can slide into your 2 guard. You have a guy, a duo in Hart. And Murray in your backcourt, and then Kawhi Leonard's your focal point of that team. It's something that maybe you look at least past the Warriors, and you look when Steph's contract finally comes up after this year, and they're going to have to pay him. You look at when Draymond's contract finally comes up, and Durant's contract finally comes up, and how are they going to keep that team together? It's really got to look at that, and do you want to just wait until that's gone, and then you could just go and rise up the ranks of the Western Conference, because you still believe in Pop, you still believe in Kawhi. Kawhi's still going to be the best player in the Western Conference for a while, or at least one of the best players in the Western Conference for the next maybe 7 to 5 years. I mean, he's going to be one of the top players there. You just want to wait past that window.
And the reason why is who's my head coach? Popovich. You could see during the Western Conference Finals when he said the line of like, yeah, they gave up out there. They just didn't believe in themselves. I looked at him and was like, he is dead inside. Like that killed him to say that and like be like, yeah, my team gave up out there, because he's the kind of coach that he'll go out there. He doesn't give a crap if you're the Golden State Warriors. He's going to, and obviously you're going to say, well, Ricky, he's going to coach because he's going to coach every game to win it. But you have a head coach that isn't going to let you sit there and go, yeah, let's just wait for Golden State to basically fall apart contract-wise. No, they're going to go out there. They're going to try to get their guy. And if CP3, if you believe he's a guy that next year can bring you over the Warriors, you go ahead and do it.
Right. I think that's fair. The thing I kind of look to is, how do I want to build my team and where's my window versus theirs? The 2 best teams in the league right now are the ones with, overwhelming superstar talent and then fill in pieces on the bench. Not, ideal bench players. Bench depth is what the Celtics had. And where did that get them?
Yeah.
You get a bunch of goods but not greats. You need great people in the NBA to take you to that next level. And I think that they need to go all in on this Chris Paul move, because that's what it takes to compete. And I think that like everyone knows that Pop wants to compete, Kawhi wants to compete, and if the moves are there to be made, they're going to pull the trigger on it.
So the best case scenario is obviously Paul declining his player option, and you're able to keep Kawhi Leonard, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Chris Paul and have that big 3, right?
Yep.
And that's something that you just got to fill in depth.
In a perfect world, yes.
And that's what we're saying. Perfect world, that's what's going to happen. But again, we know that most likely will not happen, because Pau Gasol is probably not going to turn down $6.2 million or whatever he's owed. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Spurs. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with CP3. I also don't think we touched enough on whether San Antonio is better than Los Angeles, but I think we all agree that San Antonio is better than Los Angeles.
The door or the window?
I mean, it's
the window,
LA.
the door,
whatever LA had, it's
the basement cellar, everyth's locked.
The one last point I do want to throw out there though about the Spurs and CP3 and why, of course, this is the right move is Manu. He's even at the end of that last game, that game 4, you kind of got the memento that like, yep, this is probably the last one for him. And kind of just the last thing that I was thinking when Dave made the comment about the difference between a top end point guard and one that can do service compared to the power forward. I just look at the teams, just the final 4 teams that we saw in this playoffs. You look at their point guards with Boston having an asterisk because theirs got injured in the final series. IT, Kyrie, but they've got LeBron there special, but they still got Kyrie Irving, Steph Curry, and Tony Parker. All of them have point guards that I'm going, yep, that's my number one.
Well, Tony Parker got injured, and also you don't know how he's going to come back as an injury as a 35-year-old. So that's the reason why we're asking
and
this
CP3
question.
would be an upgrade.
It's true. No one's doubting that. So that's a perfect way to end it. Tell us if you think CP3 is going to sign with the Spurs, if he's going to end up being a Spur. I think he'd look good in the black and silver out in San Antonio. Thank you. Oh, shit. Oh, it's just one of our videos scared me a little bit. Don't forget to check out that one. And also don't forget to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. But thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.